students, how are you? I hope all are good. Welcome back to another class. Today let me start English chapter number 8, the necklace. Have you ever seen a diamond necklace? Read and enjoy. The girl was one of those pretty and charming young creatures who sometimes are born as if by a slip of fate into a family of clerks. She had no dowry, no expectations, no way of being known, understood, loved, married by a rich and distinguished man. So he let herself be married to a little clerk of the Ministry of Public Instruction. She dressed plainly because she could not dress well, but she was unhappy as if she had really fallen from a higher station. Since with women there is neither caste nor rank, for beauty, grace, and charm take the place of family and birth, natural genuinity, instinct for what is elegant, a supple mind are their soul, literacy, and often make of women of the people the equals of the very greatest ladies. Matilda Bethile suffered ceaselessly, feeling herself born to enjoy all delicacies and all luxuries. She was distressed at the poverty of her dwelling, at the bareness of the walls, at the shabby chairs, the ugliness of the curtains, all those things of which other women of her rank would never even have been conscious, tortured her and made her angry. The sight of the little Breton peasant who did her humble housework aroused in her despairing regrets and bewildering dreams. She thought of silent and chambers hung with oriental tapestry illumined by tall bronze candelabra and of two great footmen in knee breeches who sleep in the big armchairs. Were drowsy by the oppressive beat of the stove. She thought of long reception halls hung with ancient silk of the dainty cabinets containing priceless curious and of the little poetish perfumed reception rooms made for chatting at club with intimate friends, with men famous and sought after, who call women envy and whose attention they all desire. When she sat down to dinner before the round table covered with a tablecloth, and used 3 days opposite her husband who uncovered the soup, tureen and declared with a delighted air, "Ah, the good soup. I don't know anything better than that." She thought of dainty dinners of shining silverware, of tapestry that people he was with ancient personages and with strange birds flying in the midst of a fairy forest, and she thought of delicious dishes served on marvelous plates and of the whispered gallantries to which you listen with a smile while you are eating the pink meat of a trout of the wing of a quail. She had no gowns, no jewels, nothing, and she loved nothing but that. She felt made for that. She would have liked so much to please, to be envied, to be charming, to be sought after. She had a friend, a former schoolmate at the convent, who was rich and whom she did not like to go to see anymore because she felt so sad when she came home. But one evening her husband reached home with a triumphant air and holding a large envelope in his hand. They said, "There is something for you." She tore the paper quickly and drew out a printed card which bore these words. क्या था उसमें? इन्विटेशन था उसके ऑफिस की तरफ से, जो उसका हस्बैंड था. The Minister of Public Instruction and Madame Georges temporarily request the honor of him and Madame Loise's company at the place of the ministry on Monday evening, January 80. Okay. Instead of being delighted as her husband had hoped, she threw the invitation on the table crossly, muttering, "What do you wish me to do with that? Why, my dear, I thought you would be glad. You never go out, and this is such a fine opportunity. I had great trouble to get it. Everyone wants to go. It is very select and they are not giving many invitations to club. The whole official word will be there." She looked at him with an irritating glance and said impatiently, "And what do you wish me to put on my back?" He had no thought of that. He stammered, "Why the gown you go to the theatre in? It looks very well to me." He stopped, distracted, seeing that his wife was weeping. To red tears and slowly from the corners of her eyes towards the corners of her mouth. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" He shuddered. Stunned. By a violent effort, she conquered her grief and replied in a calm voice, "Why?" She wiped her wet cheeks. "Nothing, only have no gown. मेरे पास कोई गाउन नहीं है पहनने के लिए." and therefore I can't go to this ball. Give you a card to some colleague whose wife is better equipped than I. He was in despair. He resumed, "Come, let us see. Mathilde, how much would it cost a suitable gown which you could use on other occasions? Something very simple." She reflected several seconds, making her calculations and wondering also what sum she could ask without drawing on herself an immediate refusal and a frightened exclamation from the economical clerk. Finally, she replied, hesitating, "I don't know exactly, but I think I could manage it with 400 francs. He grew a little pale because he was lying aside just that amount to buy a gun and treat himself to a little shooting this summer on the plain of Nanterre with several friends who went to shoot larks there of a Sunday. But he said, "Very well, I will give you 400 francs and try to have a pretty gown." The day of the ball drew near and Madame Loisel seemed sad, uneasy, anxious. Her frock was ready, however. Her husband said to her one evening, "What is the matter? Come, you have seemed very quiet these last 3 days." And she answered, "It annoys me not to have a single piece of jewelry, not a single ornament, nothing to put on. I shall look poverty stricken. I would almost rather not go to at all." "You might wear natural flowers," said her husband. उसने कहा कि पापा ज्वेलरी नहीं है तो तुम जो नेचुरल फ्लावर्स होते हैं उनकी ज्वेलरी बना के पहनो. "They are very stylish at this time of year. For 10 francs you can get 2 or 3 magnificent roses." She was not convinced. वो नहीं हुई convinced. "No, there's nothing more humiliating than to poor among the women who are rich." "How stupid you are," her husband said. "Go look up your friend, Madame Forrester, and ask her to lend you some jewels. You are intimate enough with her to do that." She uttered a cry of joy. "True, I never thought of it." The next day, she went to her friend and told her of distress. Madame Forrester went to a wardrobe with a mirror, took out a large jewel box, brought it back, opened it, and said to Madame Loisel, "Choose, my dear." She saw first some bracelets, then a pearl necklace, then a vanity gold corset with precious stones of admirable workmanship. She tried it on the ornaments before the mirror, hesitated, and could not make up her mind to part with them, to give them back. She kept asking, "Haven't you any more?" "Why, yes, look further. I don't know what you like." Suddenly, she discovered in a black satin box a superb diamond necklace, and her heart throbbed with an immoderate desire. Her hands trembled as she took it. She fastened it around her throat, outside her high neck waist, and was lost in ecstasy at her reflection in the mirror. Then she asked, hesitating, filled with anxious doubt, "Will you lend me this, only this?" "Why, yes, certainly." She threw her arms around her friend's neck, kissed her passionately, then fled with their treasure. The night of the ball arrived. Madame Eloise was a great success. She was prettier than any other woman present, elegant, graceful, smiling and wild with joy. All the men looked at her, asked her name, sought to be introduced. All the actors of the cabinet wished to boast with her. She was remarked by the minister himself. She danced with rapture, with passion, intoxicated by pleasure, forgetting all in the triumph of her beauty in the glory of her success. In a sort of cloud of happiness comprised of all her homage admiration, these opulent desires and of that sense of triumph which is so sweet to woman's heart. She left the ball about 4 o'clock in the morning. Her husband had been sleeping since midnight in a little deserted and anternol with 3 other gentlemen whose wives are one joined about. He threw over her shoulders the wraps he had brought, the modest wrap of the common life, the poverty of which contrasted with the elegance of the ball dress. She felt this and wished to escape so as not to be remarked by the other women who were enveloping themselves in costly furs. Loisa held her back, saying, "Wait a bit. You will catch cold outside. I will call a cab." But she did not listen to him and rapidly descended the stairs. When they reached the street, they could not find a carriage and began to look for one, shouting after the cabman passing at a distance. They went toward the scene in despair, shivering with cold. At last, Guy found on the quay of those ancient Thai cabs which, though they were ashamed to show their shabbiness during the day, are never seen round Paris until after dawn. It took them to their dwelling in the Rue des Martyrs, and suddenly they mounted the stairs of their flat. All was ended for her. As to him, he reflected that he must be at the ministry at 10 o'clock that morning. She removed her rags before the glass so as to see herself once more in all her glory. But suddenly she uttered a cry. She no longer had the necklace around her leg. मैंने उसे देखा, उसके गले में necklace ही नहीं. What is the matter with you? Demanded her husband, already half undressed. She turned distractedly toward him. I have lost Madame Forrester's necklace, she cried. Urolilin. He stood up bewildered, but how impossible. They looked among the folds of her skirt, of her cloak, in her pockets, everywhere, but did not find it. You are sure you had it on when you left the bowling house? Yes, I felt it in the vestibule of the minister's house. But if you had lost in the street, we should have heard it fall. It must be in the cab. Yes, probably. Did you take this number? No, and you didn't notice it? No. They looked thunderstruck at each other. At last, Loisel put on his clothes. I shall go back on foot, said he, over the whole route to see whether I can find it. He went out. She sat waiting on a chair in her ball dress, without strength to go to bed, overwhelmed, without any fire, without a thought. Her husband returned about 7 o'clock. He had found nothing. He went to police headquarters, to the newspapers' offices to offer a reward. He went to the cab companies everywhere. In fact, whether he was urged by the least spark of hope. She waited all day in the same condition of mad fear before this terrible calamity. Loisel returned at night with a hollow pale face. He had discovered nothing. You must write to your friend, said he, that you have broken the clasp of a necklace and that you are having it mended. That will give us time turn around. She wrote at his dictation. At the end of a week, they had lost all hope. Loisel, who had aged 5 years, declared, you must consider how to replace that ornament. That next day, they took the box that had contained and went to the jeweler whose name was found within. He consulted his books. It was not a Madame who sold that necklace. I must simply have furnished the case. And then they went from jeweler to jeweler, searching for a necklace like the other, trying to recall it, both sick with tabrile and grief. They found in a shop at the Palais Royal a string of diamonds that seemed to be exactly like the one they had lost. It was worth 40,000 francs. They could have it for 36. So they begged the jewelers not to sell it for 3 days yet, and they made a bargain that he should buy it back for 34,000 francs in case they should find the lost necklace before the end of February. Loisel possessed 18,000 francs which his father had left him. He would borrow the rest. He did borrow, asking a thousand francs of one, 500 of another, 5 lois here, there, lois there. He gave notes, took up loans, obligations, dealt with users and all the race of lenders. He compromised all the rest of his life, risked signing a note without even knowing whether he could meet it, and frightened by the trouble yet to come, by the black misery that was about to fall upon him, by the prospect of all the physical privations and moral tortures that he was to suffer. He went to get the new necklace, laying upon the jeweler's counter 36,000 francs. When Madame Loisel took back the necklace, Madame Forrester said to her with a chilly manner, should you have returned it sooner, I might have read it. She did not open the case, as her friend had so much feared. If she had detected a substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Would she not have taken Madame Loisel for a thief? Thereafter, Madame Loisel knew the horrible existence of the needy. She bore her part, however, with sudden heroism. That dreadful debt must be paid. She was paid. They dismissed their servant. They changed their lodging. They rented a garret under the roof. She came to know what heavy housework meant and the odious cares of the kitchen. She washed the dishes using her dainty fingers and rosy nails on greasy pots and pans. She was the soiled linen, the shirt and the disclothes, which she dried up on a line. She carried the slopes down to the street every morning and carried up to the water, stopping for breath at every landing. And dressed like a woman of the people, she went on the fruiterer, the grocer, the butcher, a basket on her arm, bargaining, meeting with impatience, defending her miserable money so by so. Every month they had to meet some notes, renew others, obtain more time. Her husband worked evening, making up our tradesmen's accounts, and at night he often copied manuscript for 5 sous a page. This life lasted 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they had paid everything with the rates of usury and the accumulations of the compound interests. So Madame Loisel looked old now. She had become the woman of impoverished household, strong and hard and rough. With rosy hair, skirts, azure and red hands, she talked out loud while washing the floor with great swishes of water. But sometimes when her husband was at the office, she sat down near the window and she thought of that gay evening of long ago, of that ball where she had been so beautiful and so admired. What would have happened if she had not lost that necklace? Who knows? Who knows who strange and changeful is life? How small a thing is needed to make our ruin us. But one Sunday, having gone to take a walk in the champs, Alice's to refresh herself after the labors of the week, and she suddenly perceived the woman who was leading a child. It was Madame Forrester, still young, so beautiful, still charming. Madame Loisel felt more should she speaks to her. Yes, certainly, and now that she had paid, she would tell her all about it. Why not? She went up. वो उनके पास पहुंचती है. Good day, Jenny. The other, astonished to be familiarly addressed by this plain good wife, did not recognize her at all and stammered. But madame, I do not know who must have mistaken. No, I am Method Loisel. Her friend uttered a cry. Oh, my poor Method, how you are changed. Yes, I have had a pretty hard life since I last saw you are in great poverty and that because of you. Of me also. Kaise? Do you remember the diamond necklace you lent me to wear at the ministerial ball? Yes, well, I lost it. What do you mean? You brought it back. I brought you back another exactly like it, and it has taken us 10 years to pay for it. You can understand that it was not easy for us who had nothing. At last it is ended, and I am very glad. Madame Forrester had stopped. You say that you bought a necklace of diamonds to replace mine. Yes, you never noticed it then. They were very similar. And she smiled with a joy that was at once proud and ingenuous. Madame Forrester, deeply moved, to her hands. Oh, my poor Method, why my necklace was passed, it was worth at most only 500 francs. वो jewelry जो थी वो artificial थी, वो diamond नहीं था. So everyone, the chapter is in here. I hope you all are very well understand for chapter. We will meet to the next class. Thank you everyone.